Hey guys, TJ Thomas here for y'all that don't know me. And I thought I'd sit down today and share a little bit about my story, about my testimony. For so long, it's been more of a oppression for me than I ever thought imaginable. And I hope and pray through all this that you'll see past everything that I'm about to present and that it benefits you for your life. And more importantly, I just pray that it's a ministry to glorify God and show all of His favor through all of this, and that it has absolutely nothing to do with myself. Um, as a child growing up, I had what I would consider to be a normal childhood. Pretty middle class. I mean, mom and dad both worked their tails off all the time, and we went through a phase of where we were in the ranching world, and my dad worked for my grandfather, my mom's dad, and they did the registered Angus cattle, and they had success at stock shows, and from stories I've heard, I was awful little when it all started. They were pretty successful in that business, and then my granddad passed away in 1985, and kind of left things in a little predicament. And my father went back to work in the oil fields in Midland, and so I was spending a lot of time, uh, between a couple different towns, Tahoka and Seagraves, and then later on in Midland when he got promoted. Um, and so things rocked along pretty well. I wasn't a real big partier in high school; just wasn't my scene. I had visions and dreams of my own, and pursued after those. But then a little later in my teens, I guess 19, 20, 21, some things began to shift a little bit. Um, Knowing that I had alcoholism in my family, I didn't really pay attention to it, and I started to play around with it a little more, and it ended up leading to what I would consider now as a full blown addiction. Um, Totally taking control of a lot of my days and nights, and ended up, you know, pretty much controlling me. Um, I wasn't a mean drunk. I was pretty much a partier. Uh, Friends, always had the same to say, and it was just a big party, good time, and no harm, no foul. Um, but a little later on in life, 3 or 4 years later, I ended up uh, getting back with a girl that I had met in high school, and we ended up getting married. And the problem really caused a lot of downfall in our marriage. And we were young, we were naive to a lot of things, and we pushed forward and tried to make the best of it. But it overtook me. And so eventually it led to an incident. Not one, but two incidents. Um, the first one caused a big fight one night, and I ended up crashing at my dad's house and pretty blacked out drunk. I ended up cheating on Jennifer, and that led to probably the hardest thing I've ever had to get through. And I'm sure one day she'll tell her story. It's probably the hardest thing she had to get through as well. Um, but when it all fell out, I was accused of rape, and so I was locked up for about a month waiting on a bond reduction. And when it finally came, Um, Trying to get back to normalcy was just almost impossible because through it all, I had lost my job. In the midst of that, we lost our apartment because it was just too much for her to try to keep up on her own. Um, we had a baby daughter on there, and it was too much. She needed some help, and so when I got out, um, we were living with her mom and dad, and on top of the guilt um, of even being in that situation, not to mention you don't know if people are judging you because rape is one of those things. It's like from our perspective, uh, it's unforgivable, so to speak. It seems like just from the classes that I had to go through on probation and stuff, I'll get to that in a minute, um, that people in our group, so to speak, they're not even a part of society anymore. Um, it was kind of a saying, and I don't even know if it's really how everyone feels, but there was a few of us that felt this way. I mean, it was like it was better to be labeled as a robber or a murderer than it was to be an RSO, and there's just no climbing out of that pit. There is no breaks. There is no forgiveness from anybody when you get that. It is pretty much the cardinal sin in America and anywhere else. And I understand because we see on the news, the gross stories, and I've learned this the hard way. Like, you really don't know what happened until you heard that person's story in its entirety. Because I was in a group of pretty diverse stories, a little bit of everything. And so I understand how the world paints that picture. But it was a difficult time, nevertheless. And everybody always asked Jennifer why she didn't leave. And she always says, because God told me to stay, that there was more there. And so we're rocking and rolling, and I'm trying to find work. And yeah, it's just not going good. The weight of the world is on me. I can't find a job. Nobody wants to give me a shot or this or that. I've heard a million excuses. And so I began, for whatever stupid reason, to turn back into the bottle. And it was stupid. It was selfish. And I mean, I have full awareness of that now, but you get to feeling sorry for yourself, and you get to feeling down on yourself, and you get to feeling like the end is inevitable. Like, you're fixing to spend the next 20, 50 years on Mars for something that's not entirely true. And I know enough from my classes that I'm not shifting the blame. It's 100% my fault for being in that situation, but I am also smart enough to sit here and say that it didn't happen the way they said it happened and what I got charged with. And so as we get closer to trial, I ended up twisting off, and I got pulled over with my daughter in the vehicle. And now I'm looking at a state jail felony of child endangerment. So to say that I'm at rock bottom is an understatement. I probably, at that moment, it was at my very worst. Um, I had no hope. I had no faith. And for whatever reason, I have no idea, I just could not bring myself to even think of suicide. And I got asked on a daily basis by counselors and all kinds of people, it just never crossed my mind. I don't know why. Um, I didn't even contemplate it. Um, Now, I won't shortchange that by any means and say that I didn't like wish I was dead or wish I wasn't around, so to speak, because I think for me that was just a natural uh, emotion. You regret yourself and hate yourself so bad, like you feel like they'd be better off without you. But never did I think about taking my own life. I never hit that, and I don't know why. The only credit I can give that to is God, and He was in every step of this. When we went to trial, or even with the plea bargain, we had just absolute total favor. I couldn't believe the amount of favor we had, um, making it where it was at least manageable. Um, and then afterwards, when it finally came about, it had been about a year. Um, just the amount of favor that was in that courtroom. Their first deal was no jail time. It was 7 years probation, with lifetime RSO. And I said, no way. I'm not going to do that. I'm not ruining my whole life over this incident, like, no way. And so it took about 30 or 40 minutes, and they came back with a 5-year probation, um, deferred adjudication with the Tim Post Registry. And so at 42, um, I'm just now eligible to go get my record expunged and get all this stuff removed, which we are fixing to begin the process now. Um, but God's hand was in that, from the judges to, I mean, just the way everything panned out. And parts of me was not really good at seeing it all the time. I mean, I knew we had favor and stuff, but I was still struggling with my faith walk. I was still struggling, um, with my walk with God, period. I had been born again at a young age, baptized at a young age, but I had drifted so far away from all that. Parts of me thinks back now, and I'm like, it was just something that we did because I think all our friends were doing it, and we didn't want to feel left out. And I think that happens a lot, with youth, and so um, we pushed forward, and we pushed on trying to make things work. I mean, we were married by an amazing uh, couple. They ran a local cowboy church there in Midland, and they were just awesome at showing us the word for the first time, and we had a decent belief system. It just wasn't. It wasn't near what it is today, and we look back and still talk about, you know, those divine connections and appointments like Pastor Monty and Susan, like Glenn and Ann Smith, that were in our lives, because they influenced us in a lot of ways, and did a lot of things for us, but it just wasn't truly, enough for me to get a hold of, or I was just running. I don't know, to be honest with you. I tried to the best of my ability. It didn't take for so long. And so then I wound up in this pickle that I got myself into. And by the sheer grace of God, we started going out to Glenn and Ann's church. He started doing some ministry schools. And the reason that all that transpired was, Monty and Susan ended up going on to be with the Lord through an airplane crash, tragic deal. And so we plugged in out there with Glenn and Ann when they began their uh, little nightly service and stuff, and got really close. And they were so good to Jennifer while I was incarcerated. Um, and then they were just so open minded and open armed for me when I got out, which I felt, I mean, about 2 inches tall and worthless. It just was devastating to try to muster through all that and try to muster through just showing your face, not to mention for me, I always felt like, um, people were talking about me behind my back and looking over my shoulder all the time. You feel literally so worthless. And, Glenn was amazing even when I was incarcerated because he was able to give me material. And that was a huge turning point in my life because that's where I truly, truly found God because I had nowhere else to turn. I had favor with the guards. Like I was able to purchase phone cards to call home, which that was the way it was. Like you had to buy a phone card, and when that time ran out, and that was it. But there was favor there. They always allowed me to get phone cards when I needed them. And I just got so close to God that it was just unbelievable. I went from Gen Pop into trustee in a matter of a week and a half, which was good and bad. I mean, you're in there with some guys that are waiting to catch chain, which those of you don't know, they've been sentenced. They're just waiting on the prison bus to come pick them up. So they got all this going on in their head, and fights occurred. And I mean, you've got guys that have been in and out, and you've got guys that it's kind of like their first rodeo. So I mean, you're in there with a little bit of everything, but at least you're able to, get out of the cell for a little bit and wash dishes and take out the trash and see air. Where in Gen Pop, like you're not, and but you're just able to feel a little bit more connected to civilization for what it's worth. But I found God and ended up leading about 3 guys to the Lord in jail. Um, young kids. I mean, a lot younger than me. I think 24, 25. They're a lot younger than me. So anyway, but through being at Glenn's, through, that connection, the last year that he held a church, a ministry school, he blessed me with my tuition, which I couldn't afford. But he blessed me with my tuition. And so, man, I jumped at it. I jumped at the opportunity. And I made the most of it. I gave it everything I had. And so I'm in school 4 or 5 days a week till noon. And I'm just engulfing myself with every bit of God that I can get. And make a really good recovery to start to try to feel something. It's still a struggle today. I won't lie and say it's not, because it's still, all this time later, it's still a major, I think we're pushing 16, 17 years. I'd have to go back and do the math, but I mean, since all that happened. And it's still a struggle to feel worth something, but, starting to try to rebuild myself. And then the other case starts to show up. And we go to the first session, and for whatever reason, it gets postponed. My lawyer, there again, favor. I had a great lawyer that had fought many of these cases, and it wasn't the fact that I was trying to fight for innocence. It was just the degree of the charges we were trying to get as low as possible and whatever, which it's not looking good with the other case. And now this, like, it's not looking good for anybody, but that favor of God just poured out. And so it got postponed, and here we go again, another month or two down the road, and comes up again, another this. And so we stomach up and toughen up, and we go to this trial, and something else transpires, and another extension for this or that. And I mean, here you go, we're rolling along, and we're knocking on the doors of like 3 years before this thing ever comes around to the fruition. And I think if I remember correctly, like the last time we ever were in a courtroom dealing with this was in Seminole, Texas, which she was the district judge, and she is known for being very no nonsense, very, hardcore. But the second time I'm in front of her, and it's like the favor of God's there. I don't know why, it just is. I have all these material witnesses in my behalf. There's all these material witnesses there to testify against me. It's a full blown battle fixing to take place, and another extension for something small. I don't even remember when you're in there. Like, it's just everything you can do to stay calm and not lose focus, and try to keep your eyes on God, and just try to hope and pray that it doesn't end up too bad. Terrified that I'm going to have to spend 25, 30 years without my family, my wife, my daughter, trying to figure out how it's going to be looking at your wife through a glass window for the next 25, 30 years, seeing your kids grow up without you. All that's going through your head. So I really don't even remember, what the reason for the postponement was. It was something pretty minor, but there again, there was God's favor. And to this day, I've never heard of anything else about it. Nothing ever has come up about it. It's my knowledge. It cycled out on the, what would you call, I guess, drawing a blank. It's, statute of limitation. Thanks, Jen. So just God's favor. And the reason that I wanted to sit down and do this video, really and truthfully, had nothing to do with me. Every fiber of my being was against doing this. It is so hard to relive, and it's so hard to rehash. And I could go into a lot greater details, and I could walk you in a step by step, but I'm not here to plead my case. And I felt like that's all that would do. And I'm not here to prove myself to anybody. And I don't mean that arrogant, and I don't mean it cocky, but I'm not. Because at the end of the day, it really isn't going to matter what anybody thinks of me. My family, my wife, and my kids, and mom and dad, and my in-laws, grandparents, and everybody that's known, like my family, they never turned their back on me. They never left me. And so that's the one that matters, because I can't help what anybody sees or thinks of me, and I'm not here for that. All I'm here to do from here on is share the love, wisdom, and knowledge of God with everybody that will give me a minute to listen. And if this ends up being too much, I respect that. I won't hold it against you. I won't think anything less of you, because I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to glorify God and tell you that He does exist, that He does still work miracles, and that He's just as much alive today as He was, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, before, because there's no way that I should have gotten the plea bargain that I got. At the time, if I do recall, the second George Bush was in office, and they were really hammering down. Nobody was getting anything less than lifetime RSO. And here I come in here, and everybody's like, how did you get that? How did you get that? Like, that's not right. It is right. And that's what's on my paperwork. Because God is that amazing that when people are willing to stop looking inward and start looking at Him and focusing on Him, He will literally open up every door that He wants opened. And nothing can stop that. Not courts, not man, not the forces of anything can stop what God wants done. And so I'm here today to tell you, if you haven't given God a shot, you're making a huge mistake. If you haven't received Jesus as Lord of your life, you need to. And you don't need a pastor or a deacon or anybody to do it. You can do it yourself. You can go read Paul's writing to the church at Rome in chapter 10, 9 and 10. He'll tell you exactly that if you confess with your mouth, believe with your heart that Jesus died on that cross for you and that God raised him from the dead 3 days later, that you will be born again. And you will begin that recovery stage of the way I did, learning what it tells us in the book of Corinthians, where there is therefore no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. And you can begin to rebuild your life. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be a cakewalk, because a lot of people do. A lot of people make you think that it's, and I've heard stories. Matter of fact, I heard a testimony from somebody that I had a lot of respect for a long time. The minute she was born again, she was an alcoholic. The minute she was born again, she had no desire for alcohol whatsoever. It wasn't that way for me. In fact, it was quite the opposite. I dealt with alcoholism still to this day. I don't play around with it. Have I had drinks? Yeah, there are times where I do, have a social drink, but it's taken a long time and a lot of struggles, within myself and between Jennifer and I to reach a level, and we both know when is and not a good time. We're very careful. We don't play around with it. If we're having a bad day, it's not happening, and it's not something we do on a regular basis. It's very few and far between. It's just not something we care to ever go back into. And for me, there was a time where I needed to, prove to myself for whatever reason that I could handle it. And since I've done that, I don't really have a desire to touch it. Whether it was a growing phase or a foolish move, I don't know. But I'm not ashamed of where I am. It doesn't change my faith walk. It doesn't change anything about me. So it's just something I needed to do for myself. I will say this, like, if you ever feel like you're not worthy, it isn't true. I'm a poster child for that. I was instructed for a long time to study certain scriptures and quotes dealing with my worth and God's love, and just trying to pound that into me. And it never stuck. It never took, and it never took ground. It was something that I still struggle with today. I am a lot better at it, and I hope you have a lot easier time with it than I have. We are our own worst enemy, hands down. And you have to learn to forgive yourself, and you have to learn that God forgives you if you ask him to. And outside of that, it really, it doesn't matter the way I see things. And I'm not saying I'm a theologist and I'm a professor at this, but I'm just telling you what worked for me, and what continues to work for me. And if it can bless you, then I'm going to share it. That was my struggle with AAs. I've been in and out of some AAs, and I've still had a long battle with alcoholism after all the favor of God, and after he had showed me why it took me a long time to get a hold of it. I don't know. Maybe it was just my journey that I had to walk through. in order to get to where I am today, in order to be able to help somebody, even if it's just one person. I would gladly suit up and wear that again if it brings one salvation to the kingdom, because that was one salvation that nobody else could have reached, that nobody else could have gotten a hold of. So I would gladly go through that again. And the TJ 15 years ago, there's no way. Like, I was all about me. I was all full of self-pride and self-pity, and like, it wasn't happening. It's all about me, and just the most selfish person that I've ever seen. And so that was my struggle with AAs. They wanted you to go make amends. And for me, no offense, if they choose to forgive you, that's fine. But if they don't, then that's fine also. And I don't see where that matters. I just don't. Because you cannot change people's perspective of you. I have learned that through my walk with this the last 15, 16 years. I have gone in and done my very hardest work to not focus on others. And they would come in and cut me, so deep, so harsh. And it would set me back. Oh my gosh, it would set me back. We were helping with a church in another small town east of here. And the pastor knew of my situation, knew all about it. It was not a secret, all that. And we still end up getting cut by people in the body, putting flyers on windshields at a big event there that was being held, I hadn't done anything to those people. I had done nothing to those people. They were offended by the pastor. Me and the pastor were fairly close, and I don't know if they were taking a shot at me or at him or at both. I don't know. It's happened a couple more times since that, in congregations. And it's the hardest thing in the world to do, to keep pulling yourself up out of a pit. And I could not have done it alone without the support and love of my wife, my family, and there's no way I could have done it without God. He was there even when I wasn't paying him any attention. His hand was in it every step of the way. And so I want to encourage everybody that sees this, that God is the most amazing force in the universe, hands down. Because there is nothing that can't be done through him or by him. He's held this marriage together through every single battle. And I joke about it, but I really think it's true that my wife and I have been through everything that a marriage can go through. In the first, we hadn't even been married 21 years yet officially. And in those first probably 10 to 15 of them, I think we've been through everything a marriage can go through. I don't think there's anything else a marriage can go through. There's been cheating on my end, alcoholism. I haven't done drugs, but alcohol is a drug, so however you want to view that. The fighting, the bickering. We've lost parents. Our youngest son, about 7.5 years ago, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. We almost lost him twice. I truly think we've been through everything a marriage can go through. And we're still here. And it's nothing more but by the sheer grace of God. We've stuck it out. We've wrote it out. We've fought through the ups. We've fought through the downs. And here we are. And truly, I see her more of a friend today. Um, I love her more today. I find her more attractive today than I did, 20 years ago when we decided to walk this thing out together. Um, it is nothing less than God's grace and God's mercy that just pours out upon us, even when we weren't paying attention to God, even when we weren't being perfect for God. I've always said this, God doesn't care about perfection. He cares about our striving to be perfect, because we're all going to fall short of his glory and his grace and his mercy. We're not even going to come close to lining up to perfection. But I think as long as you're still in the fight and you're still putting on the armor every day and you're still going to battle, I think he sees your heart. I believe that. I believe he knows your mind and your heart and your will. And I think as long as you continue to press in and press for him, no matter what it is, then no matter how many times you mess up, he's going to be there for you. I've always felt that way. I would love to be able to help marriages and individuals down the road as much as I possibly can with my testimony, my story, because I've always said, there is one thing that each and one of us have that the other one doesn't, and that's your testimony. And nobody can mimic my testimony. It can't even come close. So you have that. That is your weapon. Share your testimony. Even though it's taken me almost 20 years, so to speak, to get this out, to be able to have the courage to get in front of a camera and say, here I am, world. This is what is there, because it's so easy to mask, sugarcoat. It's so easy to hide and try to forget and push down. For me, it took my wife saying, I think this is what's holding us back. I think this is what's holding you down, is not getting your story out. And it has taken me about a week, no, 2, because we were in New Mexico on vacation before. It has taken me about 2 weeks to get the courage to do this. And even before we pushed play on this camera, like, it still was just eating me up. And I can't tell you the relief that I have at this very moment. It is like the weight of the world is removed from my shoulders, because I got this out. And it wasn't that it wasn't out there for public knowledge. Anybody could have looked it up. It's caused so much chaos and strife from place to place and here to there. So she was right. It was time to get it out. It was time to get it out there for the world to hear. And if I get shunned for it, then I understand. I don't hold it against you. You got to do what you got to do. But I believe still, even as I sat here, that God is going to honor my heart and honor our vision for doing this no matter what. And I just hope and I pray more than anything in this world that this helps somebody. It helps somebody understand that it's okay to not be perfect in the eyes of humanity. That not everything has to be negative. That giving your testimony and releasing God's power into your life can bring glory and honor to both the Holy Trinity and yourself and your marriage, even. I mean, because there is something so gratifying about being able to stand tall in the mirror. The devil will do everything he can to oppress you and keep you down, whether it's money or relationships or anything that he can get his hands on to bring in oppression and depression. He'll do it because the Bible says he comes as a roaring lion, so that means he's going to appear to be like God. He wants to seem like a good thing, even though it's doing nothing but bringing you harm. So in other words, for so long, I was afraid to step out of my comfort zone because I had an easy path. I do my yearly. I don't get bothered. It's so easy. Like, we put it behind and move on. But the whole time, you feel useless. You're not doing much. You're not being much. You're not helping much. And when you get the love and passion and fire of God in you, that's not good enough. I don't care if you're pulling down 6 figures a month. It's not good enough. You feel empty. You feel vacant. There's so much more that you want to do. You can't get it out enough. And we've had some small success. And I don't mean that condescending, but what I'm saying is, like, we've been invited to places. We've filled in at places, and we've seen some salvations, and it's never enough. Like, you're so fired up, you want to see more. You just want to help more. It's not a numbers game for me or for Jennifer. It's more of I think it's more of a just, you see the flow of the Holy Spirit, you see God moving, and you want to do more. But yet, you're afraid to step out of your comfort zone. And I'm here to say, you cannot stay in a comfort zone and soar. You cannot do it. It's impossible. You cannot stay in a comfortable spot and be useful. And some of you may disagree, and that's fine. But I truly mean that, because, excuse me, to stay in a comfort zone means you're not pushing yourself to the limits. You're not striving to be your very best. You're merely surviving. And surviving isn't living. Surviving day to day isn't living. That's why they call it surviving. To be able to lay everything on the table and say, good or bad, here it is so freeing that it allows God to truly work. It takes you out of the equation. It takes you out of the circumstance. And too many times to count, Jennifer and I have found ourselves where we flat did not have a way to fix it. We didn't have a way out. Maybe we could have asked for help. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was just the Holy Spirit saying, no, that's not what y'all need to do. But we were our only answer. And we didn't have one. So what else do? You rely on God. Prime example, here lately, we decided to really seek after the ministry full time, and really, everything we were trying to do, just even though it was successful, we still felt empty. We knew that wasn't it, or else we wouldn't felt so empty. And so we downsized on some things like vehicles, and picked up some lesser things, so to speak. We got the old Camry back running again, which had been sitting since we basically returned home from being on the road full time 3 or 4 years ago, and got it all up and running, so to speak, tires and this, you know, about a month ago almost, for whatever reason, the engine failed on us, completely failed. And we just prayed. We had people offering help, and we both, for the first time in our marriage that I can remember, we just had a peace. Here we are in the midst of the storm. Because, I mean, like, we had just bought a week and a half, so to speak, worth of groceries. We were we were sustained there. My son had all of his medical stuff that he needs, insulin and needles and things. We were good there. Um, but I mean, if something happened to him, like, it kind of is in the back of your mind. And for 7 days straight, we had a peace. We had a peace. Some of our family let us borrow a truck, and the very next day, God opened a door. And we didn't ask for the truck; they volunteered it. But we were thankful, but we were still at peace. He opened the door, and everything fell into place. And we were blessed to be able to purchase a used vehicle. And I've never been more excited for anything in my whole life, because for the first time I felt like I did it correctly, and I'm sure I messed up, but deep down I feel like for the first time I didn't panic, I didn't try to fix it, I just stopped and was still and listened to God, and He showed up. And so for that, I can't tell you the way it makes a person feel. The amazement, the miracle that goes off inside of you. It's just like, wow, you know? And I guess if this story is here for anything, it is just to simply encourage you that no matter how bad it gets, no matter how rough it seems, maybe no matter how bad of a crime you committed or were accused of, or whatever the case may be, no matter how bad it is, no matter what it looks like, it's not bigger than God. It's not more than God can handle. It's not more than God can deal with. And it's definitely not more than what God can rescue out of. There is nothing in this world any bigger or more powerful than God. And I just hope that this gets shared with as many as will do so. And truthfully, I have laid it down to the point where even if it's bad, even if for whatever reason somebody decides to broadcast this, God forbid, on CNN or whatever, and it causes this big scandal, like, it'll be okay. And the reason I say that is not out of cockiness, it's just out of, I'm trusting in God. And I'm praying that this is used for His glory, not for the, evil handiwork of the devil. My greatest fear was that it was going to harm my family, especially my immediate family, and they were behind me 100%. So that's all that matters. So I appreciate you listening to me. I'm sure there'll be a phase 2 to this as soon as the Lord lays it on my heart, and maybe some other things can be discussed that I didn't bring up or whatever, and I'm great with that. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate anybody that shares this and does anything with it for the goodness and the glory of God. And Jennifer and I love you guys, and maybe we'll see you down the road somewhere at a speaking engagement or event. So appreciate your time and thank you very much. God bless.